Y'all, it is Sunday morning. It's 9:15. It is All Hallows Eve 2021 at the Church of the Holy Trinity in Vicksburg, Mississippi. My name is Andy. Gathered with people in person here and also a panel that are friends of mine who I admire, who I call friends and brothers. And they're also willing to get into something that they have no idea what they're getting into. With me being in charge of the technology, I hope, are y'all able to hear us out there in Zoom land?
Yes.
Great.
All good.
Patrick and Charles and George, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second and answer that great question. How did you get to here? Remember, that's our first round. How did you get to here? But want to try to introduce you to the crowd. Last Sunday, we had a lovely panel, the hidden spirituality of women. And I was really impressed. Of the place we went. What it turned out being was them just telling their faith story, and that just created a great opportunity for all of us to tell our faith story. So I hope the same thing happens here. We're going to try to do it with a male slant, but you do not have to be male to participate. How about that? All right. So let's say a prayer together. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, you made us in your image. You smile at us, and you know how complicated we are, just being a little bit lower than the angels. But to know that you're aware of our struggles, and that you are a God of second and third and fourth chances, and a God who is making an even more beautiful future. Help our 45 minutes together this morning bring a new awareness. Help it comfort us in a spot or an aha moment or some type of a new question, more beautiful question to arise. Thank you for this experiment in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Good. So I will start just to model. And Charles, if you wouldn't mind putting your minute on 3 minutes, and also if you have your foghorn ready, if I go over 3 minutes, okay? He has his foghorn. What has gotten me to here? I guess curiosity. And a door has always opened as long as I've marveled at things and been curious of things. When I was 13, I got lost in the woods. I was deer hunting with my dad, got lost in the woods, and I panicked until I started being curious about what was going on in the midst of that. And I felt God coaching me through that moment of being lost, of keep on walking, breathe, be aware, don't panic. And 6 hours later, after practicing that discipline, I found my dad. And I remember he was so glad to see me. So ever since 13, I can tell I've been wandering. And ever since 13, I could tell I was blessed. And ever since I was 13, that even when I was in the midst of something bad, if it didn't start turning out to be something good, I wasn't at the end of it yet. So I've been encouraged to trust and to marvel. I went to seminary in love with God and knew I had to tell this story about God, but I didn't know Jesus until seminary and I read the Gospels, and I found out his journey and my journey matched. He became marveled at how much God loved him in the desert. He overcame temptation, and then his gospel was all about him sharing this message. Even though the world killed him, God raised him up. So I found Jesus in seminary, and I've been trying to practice that ever since. So is the foghorn out? Have you?
You're good. 2.5 minutes, Sandy.
All right, good. I'm from Greenville, born and raised there, married to Ann Andrews for 21 years. I proposed
We're locked up.
He can't hear us.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. They dropped off, so they'll have to rejoin.
Yeah, they're frozen.
Maybe it was the fear of the horn.
All right, he'll be coming back on, I'm sure.
you came back.
You were the one who left.
All right. We were just praying before y'all started talking.
That you got married to Ann.
What do you say, George?
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't hear your question. You were talking about being married to Ann. That was the last thing we heard. So if there's anything else we need to know, fill us in.
There's a lot you need to know. It will be revealed on a need-to-know basis. Why don't you go first, George Penick? Please, good friend.
My goodness, you didn't warn us. All right, I'm going to actually turn on my little timer here, try to be conscious of it. My name is George Penick. I grew up in the South, mostly in North Carolina, but basically lived in Mississippi for 30 years. And I grew up like somebody born in the late 40s in a Southern, Western Euro culture, white dominant culture, and participated and embraced the Episcopal Church. I'm a cradle Episcopalian, and went to an all-male college. So, just without even thinking about it, my life, my culture, my environment was one that shaped a lot of my subconscious thinkings about gender and myself. I will say that my father was a very kind and gentle man, and he was incredibly well educated in terms of theology, and he was extraordinary. He was an extraordinary person, but my father did not share his emotions, and this kept our family together pretty well. We were 5 children, happy middle class family, and until my brother drowned. I had an 11-year-old brother who drowned when I was in high school, and my father could not talk about it. He could not talk about it, and therefore our family could not talk about it. My mother would be talking about how she felt or a memory about my brother, and the room would just go silent. I mean, we did not have a way in the male dominant culture back then where men were strong and men were in charge and men did not show weakness. We did not have a way to be a healthy family. And that really, I think that was the first hint in my life where I realized that to be a strong, healthy adult, that I needed to be more willing or more vulnerable to others. And that led to a pretty long, lifetime of learning from my mistakes on that, about learning, of working with people who were different from me, how I was not in charge. Even in the last 10 years with adult children, I mean, they are telling me that, Dad, you think you were a gentle, kind, open father, but you were always in charge. And so even now, dealing with that, and how much of that is male and how much of that is, like I said, Southern, how much of that is being the oldest in the family, I do not know. But the spirituality, I have learned that the more that I am willing to let go, that the better things work out for me, instead of trying to be strong and just barrel right through something. If I seek God's help and let go, that a lot of the male induced handicaps that I had earlier recede.
Thank you, George. We love you, George. Thank you, man. Hey, tell us your brother's name.
His name was Andy.
Oh my God.
I know.
Wow.
All right. I had the privilege of being George and Carol's son's youth minister.
Not Andy, another brother. No, I mean, that's right.
Hey, if y'all here's some bagpipes in the background. Thank you, George Penick. George, you live in Jackson now.
We live
right?
in Jackson. Have for 30-something years, yeah.
Patrick. Hey.
Thanks. Good morning. I am Patrick Congrega. Key demographics. I'm 33 years old. I'm a person of color, multiple colors at that. And I was born and raised in the South, not too far over in Arkansas. And since then, I've done a little kind of traveling around and recently come back to Mississippi just within about the last year. I'm in Jackson, where I serve as the lay director of youth ministries at St. James Episcopal Church. Growing up, even though I was in the South, I didn't go to church. As I mentioned a little bit about my kind of ancestry, my mother is from Japan. My biological father is African-American, but wasn't in my life, hasn't been in my life. And then my adoptive father, I have 4 other siblings much older than me, and their biological father who adopted me, and he is originally from Serbia. So that's where my last name comes from. So half Black, half Japanese, Serbian last name, Southerner is kind of, you're a regular old version of that. And growing up as a young person, I didn't really go to church. I had conversations over the phone occasionally about God. My adoptive father would have considered himself a faithful person, a religious person in an Orthodox tradition. But that was about it. I occasionally went to church with neighborhood friends every once in a while and saw what it was like. My mom and I never talked about it. In fact, I think in the last 5 years is the first time I've ever heard her say anything about Jesus or God or anything like that. Growing up, I remember a lot of times as a young person being in my bed and staring up at my ceiling at night and having trouble going to sleep and wrestling with a lot of my emotions and kind of talking to the ceiling or the big guy in the sky or whoever it was. and just constantly searching for that and never having it. And a lot of that is probably the reason I am a youth minister, that I feel called to ministry. Essentially how I got here though was I was floundering around in Arkansas for the last few years. I'd attempted college and that failed miserably for me. I was doing jobs, paycheck to paycheck, working in a call center for a few years. At that same time, I discovered the Episcopal Church. And through that, someone introduced me to something called the Episcopal Service Corps, which is just kind of like a year of service. And that took me to a year in Baltimore and a year in Boston, where I got to get out of Arkansas, get out of kind of the life I was living in, have a new surroundings, and try out ministry. I got to try out youth ministry for those 2 years, and I found that I loved it. And so I took work full time in New York for a while, and then I spent 3.5 years out in California. And then recently I transitioned here to Mississippi for just a little over a year. So that's how I got here.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna have to ask you if you know my friend Jamie Edwards Acton. Did you know him?
I don't think so. Arkansas.
Okay. Thank you, brother. Can't wait to circle back around to you. Charles Smith. Charles and I were in college together. We were in college together.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Charles, welcome to the circle.
Well, it's a treat to be here. As you can tell from my cracking voice, I have a little anxiety about this, but I'm thrilled to be here. And I echo what George was saying. I kind of grew up, it seems, we were talking before this, similar to George. I went to private Episcopal school here, went off to boarding school, Episcopal school. And anyway, I'll jump back into it. But how did I get here, and how do I find myself talking about spirituality? As a young person, this date will always be important to me. 4/11/76. That was my confirmation date. And it was the first time I felt really alive and understanding, I was part of this big community. It was a great, great feeling. And that began my, or that was a catalyst for me continuing in the Episcopal faith and chasing the light. Other things, family challenges, we all have those. I always found peace through difficult times through my relationship with God. And the last on this would be, of my big three, health challenges as a young person. My freshman year, I broke my back and was very lucky to, a couple months of healing, and that was good. And then, was it sophomore, junior year, had cancer, and not just any cancer. As a young man, of course, I'm going to get testicular cancer as I'm trying to sort out the world and this and that. And my spiritual light and way and stuff have been inspired by obstacles. And I wake up every morning, I think I've told Andy this a couple times, and I just smile and go, my God, I get another chance at this. So that's a top line on me. I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I have a company called EDR Solutions. We save the world from evil hard drives. We can jump into that later if you like. But I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for the inclusion.
Thank you, Charles. I'm always baffled knowing how immature I was when I knew you, and you were dealing with all these life issues. I just admire that, and we'll have to unpack those thoughts later. Masculine, Jesus says in Mark, where is it? It's in Mark, somewhere in Mark. I've hidden these things and revealed them to the infants, and the wise I've concealed these things. The hidden spirituality that's always there, especially with men. In my reading, and I'd like for this to be the second round, I've heard that men start out with the exterior, and again, I know I'm coming at it from a Southern privileged white male perspective, so I know it's not the whole gambit, but I know in the South it's exterior. You look tough, you got to be tough. You got to look cool. I think trying to be like Arthur Fonzarelli from Happy Days. It seemed like Arthur Fonzarelli, at least for me, was the ultimate of cool spirituality that I was trying to be. I could go hit the jukebox and it would start. I could come in and it never worked for me, but that's been the past. Start out with the exterior, but through life, humbling, especially now at 54, realized that my interior was empty, where the scholars would say the feminine that we all share starts out with the interior, and then they work their way out to the exterior. I found out early on in my ministry actually later in my ministry, that bigger wasn't better. I always thought that I had to have the biggest church, and that I had to have the authority position, that I was destined to be bishop, and if I didn't get to bishop, it would mean that I hadn't achieved it, because men conquer and move forward. Once I realized what a bishop does, that sounds like the furthest thing from my gift set to do. And I realized, so I know a part of my life, I was trying to have it all together, to be the smartest person in the room, to be the holiest person in the room. And y'all have all mentioned this idea of vulnerability, which seems to have a veneer. I know early on, I developed an anger. Around 13, after I got lost in those woods, I developed an anger to the point to where I'm going to even blame a speech impediment I had, just a male or just an anger inside of me. And I think all men somehow have to find that power inside and learn how to tame it. And I still hadn't been able to tame it or be friends with it. In the second round, 3 to 5 minutes, any of those things make sense to you? Any of those things ring true in your own journey? You think that's a universal, or is that just me?
Andy, I think, your exterior is what people see. And in the Episcopal Church that I grew up in, what I saw were men in the pulpit, male acolytes, male wardens. The Episcopal Church to me seemed like a place where men were in charge, and I wasn't even conscious enough to realize that wasn't necessarily a good thing. But back, and then even as an adult, my presiding bishop didn't want ordination of women. It was a, and I wondered about the women that I grew up with, that I was in high school with, and who were in EYC with me, and we went to the same church and everything. Did they ever think of going into the ministry? I did, but did they see it as an option? And I think that's one of the things about sort of this male macho burden that we carry around is it's not just that it's hurting us, but it prevents others from living into their full lives as well. So it's a lose-lose.
Thank you, George.
Thank you all. In terms of what particularly resonates with me, I think it's interesting to me having, as surprising as it may be, doing some form of ministry for about maybe 8 years now or something like that. I do find myself, whether from maleness, southernness, or just, living in capitalism, I do find that I am consistently striving to accomplish things and to do things of note and be known for what I do. Like I very much there's a good healthy tension with being faithful and keeping my eye on God when I do those things. But I know that within me there's absolutely that drive that if I'm going to do this, I want to do it well and in a way that matters. Like that's really easily quantifiable in the realm of ministry, I think. So that part resonates with me. The other thing I would say is, I think ultimately this is rooted in the same thing, and I don't necessarily know what that root is, but I think my experience is different. I don't know that I spent a lot of time as a young person being angry, but I think as a young person, I was sad a lot of the times, and I found myself in a lethargic or apathetic place. Like maybe I would even argue perhaps I might have had some kind of depression as a young person, but I just felt sad. And most of that was because I was constantly internally processing, like constantly with my feelings and my emotions and trying to understand all of that. And, I think one thing that's helpful, I had mentioned my biological father not being around, and I said that I talked to my adoptive father on the phone. He was also not physically in my home. And basically I was raised by more or less a single mother, and then to some degree, my sisters. And so a lot of my experience is kind of matriarchal and from women and the way that those women at least approach the world. And so there's no doubt that a lot of my experience of the world is shaped by that. And the way that I approach the world is based on that. And so I've always been far more engaged and open to kind of processing that, and even processing that out loud. Like having this kind of conversation isn't that hard for me because this is my preferred way of kind of communicating and dealing with my stuff and processing it. But yeah, I remember a lot of sadness, but not so much anger. And it's taken me a long time, I think, to get past any of that.
Thank you. Hey, what part of Arkansas are you from, Patrick? What?
Central. So I grew up in Jacksonville and did mostly school in Little Rock. So. Okay.
Thank you. Charles.
Well. I'm going to take something, I was going to answer this differently, but when George commented about growing up in the white church and the white bishops, and tying back to you, Andy, believing in, I've got to strive for this. And then Patrick, your race, your combination of beautiful things. I got hooked on following Bishop Curry on the YouTube a little bit. And I don't know if y'all have ever taken a moment to Google him up and see some of his wonderful sermons. But he seemed to convey to me, he didn't use these words, but he did sing a song, but that energy inside of us. And I think with the way I was raised and stuff, men were supposed to strive and this and that. But Bishop Curry sat there doing a sermon and held up his finger, take this little light round I'm gonna let it shine. And he was able to, or what was conveyed to me in him being able to stand up there and rock is, it was a reminder to me as a man that, hey, with all the obstacles in this and that, what do I do with this? What do I do with this light that I'm so fortunate to have? This beautiful stuff. And I think Curry put it out there wonderful. Don't you shush, do good. And I'll tie that in with one of the ladies last week, Andy. I can't remember which one, but I loved it. She was going, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. And the second is like unto, what a beautiful message about how to live and how to use your energy, feminine or masculine.
Yes.
That's my comment.
It is just two commandments, loving God and loving neighbor, and we've made it really complicated. Thank you. Can I turn out to y'all? Y'all been listening? Thanks so much. Any thoughts to add to the wisdom? Oh, and then there's Greg Caraway. Hey, Greg. Greg Caraway.
Hey, Andy.
Good to see you.
You too. I was actually on earlier there. I was watching earlier, but didn't have my video on, but I didn't know when to unvideo it and interrupt things. So sorry if I was the creepy, mysterious person.
Welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Another good. Greg, do you have something to add, or anybody here from what you heard so far?
You talking to me? Yeah, that was fantastic. Thanks everyone for those amazing statements. It's a lot to swallow as we all kind of walk through what we're walking through in the various places. Yeah. And I've likewise had to undo the things I was taught about being the strong person that takes care of everything. And I'm still struggling with that, but baby steps are better than no steps at all, right?
Yeah, man. Yes.
Andy, can I make just one comment? One of the really strong learning moments of my life was I was too young when the civil rights movement was at its peak, but I got involved in the women's movement to some extent. And I was on one of the first men on this national board for programs for women and girls. And I was the second male to be put on this board. And it was the first time in my entire life where I was at the table and I was unsure of how my voice was heard. Was I being heard as a token? Did a male voice or a male experience not equate with what the women at the table, thought and had experienced? And I realized that, this was not a matter of me inviting women or African Americans or whatever into my world and letting them participate, but that I had to be open enough to be a part of their world in their sense of perspective, and not just always with me.
Thank you, George. The family and I were out camping a few weeks ago, and we realized we were in the crickets world. The crickets were so loud, and we were visitors in their world. I can remember going to seminary the first time I ever challenged myself academically, because the first time was at Ole Miss, and it just wasn't happening there. But I can remember being in seminary with other women who had also been called, and I remember in my soul saying, "Uh-oh, they're just as smart as me, or have even a better, brighter perspective, and it's not going to be as easy as me getting chosen because of how I was born and those gender parts. I'm going to have to do some extra work here." And my entire ministry, it's been like that. I've been, I'll put a preconceived notion on somebody's gifts and skill sets, and that's just an opportunity for God to tell me, oh, you have little faith, have imagination, and to see that everybody has that light, as Charles says, and we're all shining it. And I know the Episcopal Church, because of full inclusion of women, and now with gay and lesbians, and we're doing all this work on color and racism, it's going to flower. I think it's got to flower in ways. And I know not everybody wants to hear that. I get it. I know not everybody wants to hear that, but the Spirit's pushing us this way.
The Spirit is, and I go to St. Andrew's Cathedral, and we just have a new dean, and it's a female, and we had 2 women canons. And I remember Dean Maxwell's first Sunday, and of course the 3 women had done communion, and we was talking to some members afterwards, trying to see what people thought of our new dean, and this well-established, well-respected male member of the congregation said, "Well, she was good, but I'm not sure I like the optics." And I thought, well, when we had 3 men up there, was there any complaint about the optics? So, it's you're right, Andy, it's a new world, and we're kind of being thrust into it. And we need to help it to succeed, because the old ways were the wrong ways.
And growing up in it, I know I'm blind. Oh, I got such blinders on, but we all have good guides. What, did y'all have anything to add to that? Yes.
I would say I would push us a little bit on this. I think on this point that was just made of I don't know that it's such a new world. I mean, I'm young, so like forgive me for that. But one of my experiences is that I mean, particularly we talk about patriarchy and the ways in which we engage race or sexuality, whatever it is. The church, not just the Episcopal Church, the Christian church in the United States, we're kind of like the last to the new world, right? Like people have gone and they've been there and they've been exploring for a while. And we're just starting to build our colony, and that there's questions there of, what you may believe or think, and I wouldn't call it right or wrong, but like whatever it is you feel the truth to be. But I would make the claim that we're behind the times quite a bit. But
Fair. Charles?
Ditto. I agree.
So I know I wrestle with knowing that I am no longer living in the world that I perceived or thought it was, and it's certainly not as easy as I thought. Male masculinity. How have you gotten in touch with that male masculinity, and it helping you forge a way in the new world, being a bridge for you? I'll give an example. I can tell that before the pandemic, I was really proud of being vulnerable and hugging people. I was all in my life, in my ministry, I'd always would see someone who was icy and kind of cold and standoffish, and I would be like a Labrador retriever and force myself upon him or her and hug them. I realized that was a world I thought was right and real, but now I can't help but think, how many spaces have I invaded over the years by doing that? I know I did break some barriers down, but I also, so as a male, I want to learn again that I'm living in the crickets world. All right, I'm living in a big world. I'm living in God's world. And that Galileo told me a long time ago that I'm not the center of it, but I share it. And I think with my masculinity, I'm trying to learn how to share my power better and not force it on people. I'm also think I'm in the process of listening. As a preacher, I know I talk a lot, and I bet people in this room saying he hadn't listened. He's talked a lot. He's talked a lot. But I realize I got to listen more. I think as a male, the center of things, I didn't have to listen much, but I was oblivious to a lot of people hurting. Yeah.
And I think those are good comments, and I'm the king of props. And this is a favorite poem of mine, If, Kipling. And I think addressing masculine challenges and stuff like that in the way I was raised, that poem helps me, once again, with that energy and that light, to try to keep myself on the course that's right and good for the community, for the family, for me, that sort of thing. But I'm a Kipling fan. That's just a token.
Don't leave us hanging and not read If.
Andy, I'm still kind of slow. I didn't go anywhere after Oxford, Mississippi, other than to sell widgets.
Hang on before, Charles, you'll close us out with If. Patrick and George, any last comments before we sign off?
I would just comment, Charles's reference to Bishop Curry is just so spot on, because Bishop Curry speaks to everyone, and he does it with Jesus's ministry of love. And he doesn't just speak to Black Episcopalians or to men or to whatever. He really, I think everyone really does feel moved by what he brings us in terms of the way we should live our lives. And I think I think that certainly gives me something to think about every time I open my mouth.
Thank you. Patrick, any last words?
Yeah, I would just say two things. Sorry, 1 second. What I would say is, I think sometimes it's really subtle. Andy, your story reminded me of maybe the very first time I did safe church training, if anyone's ever done that or is aware of that. And I remember kind of going through the stories, and you hear these really kind of, frankly, horrific but true stories of just power imbalance and abuse and different things like that. And I remember one guy talking about, I think it was like giving the peace or something like that. And I started reflecting about how I give the peace in church at the time, and like how, and I started to realize like, oh, I shake men's hands. And then for women, I either like kind of cup a hand, like on both sides, or I like go in for a hug. And it was distinct. It was subtly, but distinctively different. And I even realized, so in my own way, and even at the time, what I thought was pretty aware of my own things, I clearly approached male and female differently. And I think there are like a lot of subtle kind of things like that in our lives that we don't always pick up on, that demonstrate kind of the belief systems that we have and the structures that are in our head. And so that was like a really kind of opening kind of experience for me. And I still think about that over the years. And then the last thing I will say is, I think for me, I really tried to I tried to use my emotional authenticity as a male to show that we can feel how we feel and be how we are, and that there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a strength. And particularly as I work with young people, I try to do that. And I don't really, it's the Episcopal Church. I don't work with a lot of young people of color, but I recognize that as a male person of color, I think there's a particularly calling to be emotionally authentic and strong in that emotional authenticity. And so that's a part of kind of how I live my life. So
thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Anything from the group? Did you hear anything? Joe, anything that you're gonna chew on, walk away with, surprised you?
This
Ray.
is more just,
Are y'all able to hear Ray? If you go ahead and say Ray and I'll paraphrase.
this is more just relating to something that George said back at the beginning. My father was a doctor, and he was my model, just as others have said. And he never was an emotional person. Always amazed me. I never saw him have any emotion about anything that had to do with family or anything, or his patience, anything sadness. But every Monday night he would watch Marcus Welby and just burst out in tears. The model that I had was that you showed emotion through other media. You didn't show emotion in like a room like this with other people. You found an outlet. And it's just, to me, so refreshing to know that we've learned that this is where the emotion really needs to be.
Yes. So in our attempt to try to open this conversation up, thank you, George. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate y'all. Thank you, Greg Caraway. Hey, okay, Charles, read F for us, will you? Close it
Did
out.
not know this was coming. Bear with me. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dream your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe the word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone, and so hold when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Happy Halloween, y'all.
It's almost like you planned that.
Yeah. Woo. Thank
Love-
you, friends. Love you all. Thank you.
Thank you for the
Great
invitation.
day. Great day. Honored. Love you, Greg Caraway.
That's the Holy Trinity.